what's going on right now in the Middle East is a huge concern. It seems that the aerial refueling tankers that entered Europe from the United States in the past 2 days are now on their way to the Middle East, and some of them have already arrived at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar,
Mm.
and they were carrying fighter jets alongside them. It seems that, as we were talking before coming up, you've mentioned that the meeting between Hexet and generals and admirals can be related to what's going on in the Middle East. Your take on that?
Yes, that's right, Nima. The big news in the United States for the last couple of days, and I saw this headline coming through the Washington Post. I saw all the media outlets reporting it, and looked a bit strange. For the last 3 days, they say Pete Hegseth having an unprecedented meeting of U.S. generals. They don't know what they were going to be talking about, what the agenda was going to be. And then we see another sort of leak or a release of some information last night saying that it's about DEI and Hegseth putting an end to wokeness in the Pentagon, and we're done with that and so forth. That got a lot of headlines, and of course the Democrats latched on to that as well as the left-wing mainstream press. And it looks like I thought it was a cover for something, and it certainly looks like potentially is cover for what you're just describing here, which is a military buildup and escalation for an attack on Iran. What the timeline for that is, we don't know, but there's just this rush. If you noticed as well, Nima, there was a rush to push forward a peace plan by the Trump administration, a Hamas latest ceasefire plan, and it specifically featured Qatar, which was interesting. And they offered Qatar, amnesty, if you will, or there'll be no aggression. They'll allow Hamas leaders to leave Gaza, and they could go to Qatar so long as they don't promote violence and so forth. And so it was basically one of these deals, these typical Israeli deals, which the U.S. are now doing, which Trump is doing, the Israeli-style negotiation tactic, which is to construct some kind of a negotiations deal that's totally unattainable, that nobody will all agree to on all these different third and fourth parties. And then when it does break down, then the Israelis or the U.S. turn around and say, we have a perfectly good deal, but the other side didn't accept it, and we're going to go ahead and bomb again. And so that's always been the Israeli tactic, to stall and buy time in order to change facts on the ground. And they really want to get this Gaza situation finished. And they can't do it just by bombing and killing every single last inhabitant in the Gaza Strip. They were trying to see if there was a way they could coax Hamas, coax the Palestinians into some kind of an interim arrangement, and where they would disarm Hamas, and that they would no longer, the leaders would leave the Gaza Strip. And I have to tell you that even if the Palestinians were naive or dumb enough to comply with a deal like this, you could be certain that Israel will target and try to kill and assassinate every last Hamas person that left the Gaza Strip, no matter what country they're in. And they've already proven that they're willing and able to do that. So whatever promises are made by the U.S. and Israel to the Palestinians, that, if you just accept this, and then, we'll start a new interim a government, a kind of Tony Blair-led, colonial viceroy administrative government, and everything's going to be fine. We promise we won't attack. I honestly, if you think you can trust the Israelis, that they're not going to continue to bomb or attack, that would just be so foolish. I can't see the Palestinians doing that, but they'll use this. The Israelis and the Americans and the Trump administration will use this by saying, look, we tried, we gave them a perfect deal, and they just rejected it. So they kind of deserve what's coming to them now, bombs away. But bombs away, it won't be quick enough to fast track a war with Iran before Christmas. And Trump really wants to do this before Christmas, I think. And Israel, let's say Israel wants it done before Christmas. Trump does what Israel wants. That's my read on it.
Do you feel that if they attack Iran, Israelis attack Iran, Europe, together with the United States, maybe Canada, Australia, New Zealand, these countries are going to join? Or how? Because somehow I feel that Europe is so much involved in the conflict in Ukraine. So coming to the conflict with Iran, it's somehow something beyond what beyond the Europe's capabilities. But when it comes to the situation in Gaza, in my opinion, as you mentioned, is the main point to distract people from what's going on in Gaza and just going on with the plan, just destroying everything, removing people from Gaza. I think Iran is being used so far as a distraction, beyond having those sort of mindset that regime change in Iran may change the whole face of the Middle East, all of that. But they're using the attack on Iran as a leverage, as some sort of distraction to what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely a great distraction to turn the world's eyes away from an ongoing genocide, which is one of the worst crimes against humanity ever committed in living memory in front of the world before their eyes. So that's for certain. Whether the Europeans will be involved in any attack on Iran, the only thing that could assure that would be some kind of a false flag attack on European soil, in which they would blame Iran or blame Hezbollah or blame something that they could tie to Iran. And then the European leaders are naive and stupid enough to get themselves pulled into that sort of situation. But it's only for show. It's only kind of a fig leaf for a coalition that's not really a coalition. And the U.S. did this with Iraq as well, the coalition of the willing. And they, slapped together these coalitions in order to give the lead powers legitimacy. That's what these coalitions are for. But you can be sure that Britain will be going in, because the British military establishment, they look at all of these altercations as opportunities to get involved, so that their military industrial complex can remain relevant, so that their command and their status within NATO as number two in the NATO command hierarchy remains solidified, that their intelligence services get involved and get experience. So they need to be involved in everything the U.S. is involved in order to stay up to date and relevant. It's almost like live training, if you will, even though they're not making a huge impact often on the actual battlefield. Britain's always there. So that keeps their whole shtick going as a sort of, second tier superpower. But it is mainly a U.S. unilateral action, and with the Israelis, of course. And so this coalition of Israel and the U.S., this is being sold. It's an effective sales pitch to the Trump base, mostly to the MAGA base. Although the part of the MAGA base Trump's base is peeling off on the issue of Israel, similar to how Charlie Kirk, the late conservative activist, was veering away from the Israel issue. This is a big problem within the Trump base. But see, with America, you have to understand the psychology. The public psychology is, once America is engaged in a war, it's viewed as unpatriotic not to support that war, even if that war is illegal, even if that war is waged on a false pretense, even if it's waged on a complete lie like WMDs in Iraq, that most Americans will fall in line, even on the left. They'll fall in line for fear of being accused of being anti-American or not patriotic during a time of war. So that's the phenomenon. And, the U.S. establishment always banks on that. So as long as they can get involved and at least sell it out the gates, sell it right in the beginning, the first couple of days. And if it's plausible enough to make a mainstream narrative for the major networks and for the White House and Washington, and then once it's in motion, it doesn't matter what a debacle it turns out being. It's somewhat legitimized just because America's already deeply involved in it. So, but is Iran the same as Iraq? Absolutely not. Iran's capabilities are far beyond anything that the former Iraqi Republican Guard ever dreamed they could ever have. And so if Scud missiles, Saddam's Scud missiles, were enough to terrorize Israel and the American public, what will come as a result of the aggression on Iran will probably be a resumption of heavy damage in Tel Aviv. So we can talk about the tactics and the strategy in terms of defending Israel there, but so I don't know how this will end up. I don't know how far this is going to extend. Certainly, Yemen would be part of this as well, in both directions, and that's something to consider. So that's interesting. And Qatar, of course, is very key. They're a key staging ground for the U.S. military, for reconnaissance, for the U.S. and the British, flying rivet fighters and AWACS, pulling data in, and also providing the broader defense umbrella for Israel. Israel's defense umbrella in the event of a missile attack extends all the way from the Red Sea, all the way to Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, all the way to north to Azerbaijan, and even to Turkey, to Incirlik Air Force Base, to Cyprus, and also U.S. naval assets parked in the Mediterranean, and even to parts of Egypt where the U.S. have some facilities as well. But that's how big the defense, security envelope is for Israel. That's what it requires to defend that little tiny country called Israel. It takes all of that, all of those U.S. bases, all of those naval and air assets, all of those troops and facilities and allies in the region, which is, if you think about it, it's absolutely incredible what it takes, the amount of heavy lifting it takes to defend this little country, Israel, that's currently waging war against at least 1, 2, 3, 4, or has waged war 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, possibly 6 countries in its neighboring region, which, if you think about that, that's also incredible.
I think when it comes to defending Israel, from what we've seen in the first conflict between the two direct conflict between Iran and Israel, we saw that the air defense system didn't work, and Iran easily can saturate the Israeli airspace, and that's why I think one of the. On the other hand, Iran is able to hit all of these bases, U.S. bases, including Diego Garcia. And we know that Diego Garcia doesn't have air defense system sufficient to defend itself. That's huge. I don't know why they're doing this. That's why I'm talking. It seems to me that they know what would be the outcome, but they want it so desperately. And do you think that this time around we're gonna have Germany on the part of Israel? Because Merz said recently that they're doing our dirty job, and I don't know if they're gonna actively join Israel in this attack.
No, Germany can't. It's the U.S. and Israel. I mean, what the Europeans will do is snapback sanctions this week. So those have come into play. The snapback sanctions deadline passed this week. So for the Europeans' part, they will be, economic sanctions on Iran. That's a big signal as well. Based on what? That they're, violating the JCPOA. Europe didn't fulfill its obligations for the original JCPOA in terms of sanctions relief and and money that was due to Iran and so forth. And the United States, the main party, unilaterally withdrew in, I believe, May 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's why the agreement
Since
collapsed.
2017, if I'm not mistaken.
2017, yeah, during
Yeah.
Trump, the first year of Trump's presidency. So I mean, to still be blaming Iran for being derelict on their obligations for the nuclear deal for many Europeans it just shows you how corrupt and what lapdogs the European leaders have become to the United States and to Israel. And I think it's that combination of Israel and the United States that is basically holding these European leaders hostage, if you will. I mean, they may or may not want to support Israel to that just insane gratuitous degree, which they are, and opposing Iran on the basis of that's what the U.S. and Tel Aviv want. But if you took Israel out of the picture, probably the European countries would be arguing with, or at least negotiating or opposing the United States on this Iranian issue. I'm sure of it. But the Zionist lobby has such a stranglehold now over most European countries. I mean, we're talking about thousands of NGOs, thousands of lobbying groups, thousands of organizations that have been constructed just in Europe and the UK alone. I'm not even talking about the United States. And that's the sort of ecosystem, if you will, the soft power ecosystem that the Israeli and the sort of world Jewish community has constructed in order that Israel gets what it wants. So they'll do their part on the sanctions, and I think the big risk here, I think, is going to be, one of them is, what role will Azerbaijan play in an attack on Iran, and what about Iraqi Kurdistan, the KRG? What role are they going to play, and what role will Syria play, the new Syria under Jolani, which isn't really a proper country at the moment, but with the former ISIS and Al-Qaeda head who's being feted at the UN. The timing of that whole public relations stunt in New York should also be looked at closely, because that's also a big part of this story. Because Syria is an important staging ground, or at least a pathway that Israel has for launching its own attacks. I think that's also how they will sell this in the United States, and it's how it started before, is Israel will attack, and then the United States will come and join them or bail them out, basically, because they can't do it themselves. So, I mean, that's probably going to happen again.